Good morning. Ooh, look at that picture. Good morning, everybody. I am, K-Talk is still playing some other shows, so I'm going to go ahead and start my programming. No, it just stopped. So maybe I am at K-Talk. Global Affairs Unfiltered with me, Jack Stockwell. Welcome this morning. Um, let me see if I can get, let me see if I'm even broadcasting. I don't know. I can't get my mouse to work. Good, that's just wonderful. All right. Well, no, it looks like I might be. So welcome, K-Talk. Welcome those on the stream. You're listening to Global Affairs Unfiltered this August or September 9th, 2025. My name is Jack Stockwell. I'll be here for the next hour. Breaking news. There were several things I wanted to talk about, not the least of which was Israel's efforts in the Gaza to move away from actually attacking Hamas and starting the mass exporting Palestinians. I want to get to that, but the big thing now is that Israel's military has announced that it conducted a precise strike targeting the senior leadership of the Hamas organization in Qatar, in Doha. Now, we know that the largest military base in the Persian Gulf is in Doha. And the United States has a huge base in Doha. And Israel has just wrapped up a massive military attack. They didn't confirm the location of the strikes in their statement, but they said they targeted leaders of Hamas, who, in the IDF's words, for years have led the terrorist organization's operations, directly responsible for the brutal October 7th massacre, and have been orchestrating and managing the war against the state of Israel. So Israel now has committed an act of war against Qatar. The Al Jazeera, I'm looking at several different sources right now, trying to collate some sensible idea and understanding of what's going on. But the Al Jazeera television network said in an ongoing meeting of Hamas leaders in Doha, the bombs landed as they gathered to discuss the recent U.S. ceasefire proposal to end the war in the Gaza Strip. So just as the Western leaders, with their heads up their butt, keep attacking Russia with the idea that Russia doesn't want peace, Russia doesn't want a ceasefire, obviously they don't, and that they're just not going to be able to be dealt with sensibly. So now Israel is saying essentially the same thing against Hamas, because Hamas does not want peace. They can't sit down and talk about a ceasefire, return of the hostages, whatever. When in the midst of Hamas leadership meeting in Doha as to how they can do a ceasefire and can release the hostages, Israel kills them. So it's obviously that Israel is the one that does not want any peace. So prior to the strike, measures had been taken to mitigate harm to some of the civilians, including the use of so-called precise munitions and additional intelligence. This is getting very, very serious. And this Hamas, which the IDF, of course, has long considered a terrorist organization by Israel. Hamas has considered Israel a terrorist organization for a long time. And both the U.S. and the European Union have maintained primary political offices in Doha for years. They didn't just move in, they've been there a long time, through which it has conducted most of its diplomacy since the war in Gaza was sparked by the group's October 7th terrorist attack on Israel, which, of course, we know by now, Israel had a very strong hand in the October 7th with the Hannibal Directive and everything else that was involved. We know what happened. Now, Qatar is a very close ally of the United States. And I think I mentioned it earlier, it hosts the largest military base in all of the Middle East. And the Qatar government, of course, condemns what it considers a cowardly Israeli attack that targeted residential compounds housing several members of Hamas's political bureau in the Qatari capital of Doha. Now, you have to ask about the timing. You always want to look into the timing of these things. What's going on that is really important in the background when you're looking at something like this, because obviously Israeli intelligence has known about the locations of these Hamas leadership positions in the various areas of Doha for some time now. I mean, there's no surprise that's where they're hanging out. So what else is going on that would make you wonder about why did they decide to do that now? Because out the window goes the peace arrangements, out the window go the Abraham Accords. I mean, everything is over with, as this attack on Doha, of course, is going to cover up further annexation of the West Bank by Israel, by the IDF. They're already moving into the West Bank. They've been slowly doing it. Now they're going to be doing it much more forcefully to take over the entire West Bank. And you know, right there in the heart of the West Bank is Jerusalem. And in the heart of Jerusalem is the Temple Mount. And right next to the Temple Mount is the second holiest place. I believe it's the second holiest place in all of Islam. The very famous mosque that old Ariel Sharon just went marching up to, what was it, 20 years ago, whenever it was, and we almost had the end of the world then. But as the Antichrist continues to, the Antichrist. I talked about this yesterday. I'm absolutely convinced the Antichrist is not a man in particular. I don't think that has been interpreted correctly. The Antichrist is Israel, in my opinion. I might be wrong. But even Islam recognizes Jesus as a prophet, a legitimate prophet of God. Not the Son of God, but a prophet of God. But when you read the Talmud and what it has to say about Jesus, is that anti-Semitic? No, it's not anti-Semitic at all. It's what's in the Talmud. I'm just telling you what's there. And I'm telling you, in my opinion, Israel is the Antichrist. And if you can look at Israel in that light, and then you read some of the statements in the book of Revelation regarding the Antichrist, it makes a lot more sense. All right, back to Qatar, as I said, is a close ally of the United States, and it hosts the largest military base in all of the Middle East, the U.S. military base. So this, a spokesman for Qatar Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Al Ansari, says this. This criminal act constitutes a blatant violation of all international laws and norms and poses a serious threat to the security and safety of Qatari citizens and residents. Qatar reiterates its firm stance that it will not tolerate this reckless Israeli behavior and continued destabilization of regional security, nor any act that targets its sovereignty and safety. Investigations are being conducted at the highest level, and further details will be announced as soon as they become available. Blah, blah, blah. Do you think Israel could have done this without permission from the White House? Or do you think the White House needed permission from Israel in order for the United States to give permission to Israel for this attack? Of course, the United States is immediately involved, hand in hand, with this attack. We don't seem to have any problem in this country anymore with murder, just as President Trump did here last week with those 11 members of that boat allegedly coming from Venezuela, allegedly carrying drugs, allegedly being tackled there in the Caribbean. There's so many things wrong with that story. But anytime you send a missile in international waters and you kill people for whatever reason you want to kill them, it's still murder. I don't care how you look. I've talked to several people about this. I haven't found. Everybody's wrong but Jack. No, I haven't found one person who agrees with me. No, they had to do it. They were carrying drugs. And well, how do you know? How do you know they were carrying drugs? You have to trust American intel for that. Have you learned anything about American intel by now? What they should have done is hit that boat with grappling hooks, dragged them into American territorial waters, then arrest them, bring them before a judge, a grand jury, indict them if necessary, charge them, and then carry out due process. Because if they can, if our government can target a bunch of so-called drug runners, and there's a problem with that too. Did you see the boat? A big, wide, open boat with 11 people in it, 3 outboard engines on the back. Was there a floating gas station out there in the ocean somewhere that they could refuel these outboard motors? And why in the world do you waste time in a boat with a bunch of men that could have been stacks and stacks of cocaine? There's all kinds of things wrong with that story, but the biggest thing that's wrong was the murder that was involved with it. And I don't know what else to call it but cold-blooded murder. Now, back to the cold-blooded murder that just took place by IDF against Hamas leadership in Doha, where they were meeting to discuss the ceasefire and return of the hostages to Israel, because Israel does not want the hostages returned. Just think about it. If the hostages were to be returned, what would they be fighting for? And they're fighting for the land. They're fighting to get rid of every last Palestinian out of Gaza. Egypt just moved 50,000 troops onto the border with Israel in the Sinai area to prevent them, the poor Palestinians, from being pushed into Egypt. You know, it's just not that hard to figure this stuff out. It really isn't. So here's the official statement from the IDF. The IDF and the ISA conducted a precise strike targeting the senior leadership of the Hamas terrorist organization. Again, do you think they just suddenly discovered where they're at? No, they've known where they're at. They've known that Doha has been the holding ground for Hamas leadership because they're supposed to be safe there. Obviously, Hamas leadership isn't going to be hanging out in the Gaza, or in Lebanon, or in Syria, or in Jordan. They got to jump across the water. For years, these members of the Hamas leadership have led the terrorist organization's operations, are directly responsible for the brutal October 7th massacre, and have been orchestrating and managing the war against the state of Israel. A spokesperson for Qatar's foreign ministry says that the attack that Israel has now claimed will be answered in the strongest possible terms. Like what? Harsh language? You shouldn't have done that, Israel. In the strongest possible terms. Now, Qatar has missiles. They have American missiles. Where do you suppose Qatar's missiles are aimed at? Now, to me, that's the strongest possible. Strongest possible. What's stronger than possible? The strongest possible terms. This attack will be answered. Nah, it's just a bunch of blathering. A blatant violation of international laws, as well as a serious threat to those living in Qatar. Qatar affirms it will not tolerate this reckless Israeli behavior and the continuous tampering with the security of the region and any action aimed at its security and sovereignty. The statement concludes. So, now I want you to look at this in the context of militarist thinking. What is Israel up to? What are the goals of the right-wing lunatics that are in charge of the IDF and in charge of the Israeli government? And the fact that there's a growing percentage of Israeli citizens who aren't happy with the direction that the Israeli government and the IDF are taking. Just like here, there's what is it, 70% of those that were polled in America are not very happy at all whatsoever with the condition of the Palestinians in Gaza. What are we doing about it? There's 100,000 mass demonstration. I forget what city in Europe. It just happened this weekend, protesting this kind of stuff. Anyway, you always have to look at it in the context of everything else that's going on and timing. What is the timing behind this? Well, as I said, Israel is moving into the West Bank. They will annex the West Bank, I predict, before Christmas Day. They're just going to take the whole thing over. How many Palestinians are there? I think there's something like a little over 1 million Palestinians in the West Bank who have been slowly pushed out off of their farms, off of their ranches, off of their homes, off of their land, off of their orchards, off of their gardens, slowly pushed out. And the IDF has been arming Israeli citizens and giving and told, here's your new, your 40 acres and your mule. But there's Palestinians living there. Push them out. And if they won't go, shoot them. It's that bad. Don't wait for Fox News to tell you how bad it is. Fox News has been bought and sold. So, when you look at Israel's war on Gaza City in the context of this, and the expansion of Greater Israel, Eretz Israel, which is going to include a huge piece of Egypt from the Nile River east, all the way down to Ethiopia, a good portion of the southern desert, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, right up to the Iranian border and up to the Euphrates. That's where they're headed. Now, in the midst of all of that, you have the continuing movement by the West for continued war in the Ukraine as we march on towards World War III. Now, the Israeli Air Force hit a commercial building in Gaza City yesterday, just turning it into a pile of rubble. And that's what they're doing. They're targeting Palestinians. I mean, they're still openly killing Palestinian children. But now they are leveling one building after another. That is, the idea is to force the Palestinians further south and then further west towards Egypt, because it's too far. I mean, Jordan is probably as good a place as any, but Jordan has troops all along their border trying to keep the Palestinians out, which seems like a misnomer because Jordan is 60 to 70% Palestinian. Anyway, this strike on several high-rise residential commercial buildings in the last few days, and this blood-curdling warning that came from the Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz. He said, "This is the last warning to the murderers and the rapists of Hamas in Gaza and in luxury hotels abroad. Release the hostages, put down your weapons, or Gaza will be destroyed and you will be obliterated." That sounds like something right out of the mouth of Donald Trump. So Katz wrote this on X yesterday. "The IDF is continuing with its plans, and we are preparing to expand the maneuver to defeat Gaza." Not Hamas, interestingly enough. They're going to defeat Gaza. And of course, Gaza's buildings have no way of fighting back. So when they go for the defeat of Gaza, they just level one building after another. The IDF has claimed, without presenting any evidence, that the high-rises are part of Hamas's terrorist infrastructure and are therefore legitimate targets. Did they just discover that this weekend? Times of Israel notes that the strikes come as Israel continues to set the stage for a major offensive to take over Gaza City in the northern Gaza Strip. And beyond their operational justification, the strikes have also been interpreted as a part of an effort to motivate the citizens to leave the city in advance of the takeover operation. And Jared Kushner's probably over there waving the flag. Follow me. Follow me to the next pile of rubble. I'm sorry if I'm insulting some of you, but this is I'm just kind of reaching my end on this stuff. And yesterday I was talking about Project Bluebeam and how all of these things, and even when you look at the apocalyptic picture regarding the Book of Revelation and Israel and the plains of Jezreel and Megiddo and the surrounding of what's left of Israel before their Messiah finally comes. And wouldn't that be ironic that Messiah comes to the anti-Messiah? Anyway, Hamas, after President Trump's ultimatum he gave yesterday, or Sunday, I think, they posted a statement affirming its readiness to negotiate, provided there are guarantees that the Israeli side will adhere to any agreements that results. That's what was going on in this meeting in Doha. As long as Israel agrees to stand by what they agree to do, if they agree to stay with their agreements, we'll agree. Well, who's left to do that now on the part of Hamas? They said Hamas welcomes any move that assists in efforts to stop the aggression against our people and affirms that it is immediately ready to sit at the negotiating table to discuss the release of all prisoners in exchange for a clear declaration of ending the war, complete withdrawal from the Strip, and the formation of a committee to manage the Gaza Strip composed of independent Palestinians, which will immediately assume its work with a guarantee that the Israelis' enemy public and explicit commitment to what will be agreed upon so that the previous experiences of reaching agreements and then rejecting or overturning them are not repeated. And then the last of these of the agreement presented by the mediators to the movement based on the American proposal, which the movement approved in Cairo back in I think just a month ago in Cairo. The Israeli occupation has not responded to what was agreed then, but rather continues the massacre and the ethnic cleansing. So why would you trust anything that came out of the mouth of IDF any more than you would trust anything in world politics that came out of the mouth of the Oval Office in the United States? They say one thing and then they do something else. I don't think it's that hard to figure out what's going on here, who's in charge. But Israel has officially moved on from destroying Hamas to erasing Palestine, which I think that's the real goal here. This is so much to eradicate the October 7th bad boys, because you're not going to do that. And the hesitancy on the part of the IDF to go further into Gaza is because of the strength of the Hamas resistance. You're not getting a clear picture. I went to Al Jazeera earlier this morning. I looked at RT regarding the strikes on Hamas, and it just says, yeah, there's a senior leadership of Hamas, details to follow. So they're investigating a little bit further. The other thing I was looking at was CBS, and the other thing I was looking at was the BBC. I think BBC is about as reliable as Fox News. However, and now I'm understanding more and more why Tucker Carlson left Fox. I thought he made a bad strategic error when he did that, but no, I understand why now. In any event, and I may be sounding a little confusing here, but despite the objections from the rest of the world, Netanyahu's government is getting ready to send in, have already started, mostly it's airstrikes, but they're going to send in a huge armada, not armada, but cavalry, whatever you call it, of tanks. Uh, about a month ago, Netanyahu dispelled any lingering ambiguity with what I'm talking about in a direct interview that he had with Fox News. You probably saw it like I did, where he made explicit what had long been implied through their little diplomatic euphemisms, that Israel intends to take full military control of the Gaza, dismantle Hamas, and eventually transfer authority to a non-Hamas civilian administration, ideally with Arab participation. Oh, just more BS. They're going to cleanse the land. They're the hand of God to clean out the Philistine. My terminologies might be incorrect here, but you get the idea here. They're the latter-day Joshua, and they have to cleanse the land to promote a murderous, child-killing, family-starving government, supposedly the chosen people of God. Ugh. It just makes me nauseous. We're not going to govern Gaza, says the Prime Minister, Netanyahu. But we're going to seize, but we're not going to rule. So the very next day, Israel's Security Cabinet gave formal approval to this trajectory, initiating preparations for the assault on Gaza City. Do you see the trouble the Israeli government is having with calling back in the recruits and those who temporarily, everybody apparently, all males, maybe females, I know all males, have to serve a period of time in the Israeli army. I don't know that wouldn't be a good idea in our country, if our country had a clear understanding of its mission, if we could get back to constitutional concepts. I'm afraid those days may be over with. I was just listening to the replay of the K-Talk show, and talking about constitutional principles and whatever. And I remember a time in my life where I longed for that. But I think I'm too much of a realist. I think Americans have, by their inactivity and their licentiousness and their debaucheries and their abandonment of civilian responsibilities, have pretty well lost their country. When I look at who's in charge, when I look at the fact that every single member of the House of Representatives, except one, has AIPAC representatives on their crew, and every member of the Senate, every now and then there's this little glimmer of hope. And thank good, with all of my criticisms of Donald Trump, thank goodness he won, considering the alternative. I think World War III would be well underway by now had he not been elected. But it's coming. World War III is still coming. And I'm concerned for my grandsons because of that. But this idea of an assault on Gaza City to get rid of Hamas is the battle cry. That's not what they're really doing. They're going to clean house. They're going to clean house of every last mother's son who's a Palestinian and clean them out. And then they're going to bring in an army of D-12 cat bulldozers to level everything out and reclaim the land in the name of Greater Israel. Now, August exposed what is going on here in the most unforgiving clarity. The strikes on Zaytun, Shuja, Sabra, and operations in the Jabalia area have become a part of the daily rhythm. The encirclement of Gaza City tightening slowly but relentlessly. Brigadier General Defrin confirmed the launch of a new phase with troops reaching the city's outskirts. And at the same time, the government has called up tens of thousands of reservists. And these reservists are leaving the country because they don't want to die, because they know if they go to Gaza, Hamas is going to kill them. And all of the what appears like stalling on the part of the IDF to go into Gaza is simply because Hamas has pushed them out several times. Now, where are you going to read that? Well, you're not. Haaretz is talking about it. There's intimations of it in the Times of Israel. Even the Jerusalem Post has published a couple of articles as to how the IDF is stumbling over their own tanks because Hamas is still well armed, have plenty of tank destroying missiles, and really have control of the Gaza. And so tens of thousands of reservists in Israel have been called up. Many of them have already gone in since October 7th, served some time, and went home. The suicide rate among these reservists is almost as great as it is here in America, of our veterans. And so this whole idea of trying to stabilize the Gaza, I mean, the infrastructure lies in ruins. The healthcare system is completely on the verge of collapse. The aid lines, if you can get an aid truck or vehicle in there, are under fire. Over 250 journalists have been killed by the double bait system that they use. Israeli intelligence finds out where there's a few Palestinian journalists meeting together to share their notes, and they send in a missile. And then they wait long enough for the first responders to show up and other journalists to show up to report on what happened, and then they send in the second missile. They're not interested in stabilizing anything. And of course, there's signs of famine. So the conflict is no longer conventional war between armies. It's taking on the contours of a managed disintegration of an ethnic group of people called Palestinians. And Gaza is not the whole picture. On the West Bank, the logic of military control is being what's the word for when you take something that's illegal and try to make it legal? On July 23rd, the Knesset voted by majority to adopt a declaration advocating the extension of Israeli sovereignty over Judea, Samaria, and the Jordan Valley. It's just, it's just like the United States government, our Congress, voting on a law to take over southern Ontario's rich farmlands. We want them for ourselves, and we're going to go take them. So it's in the framework of what's called the E1, the letter E1 plan of Israeli settlements in the West Bank as a critical link in the eastern belt surrounding Jerusalem. So on August 20th, the Higher Planning Committee of the Civil Administration gave the green light for the construction of over 3,400 housing units in East Jerusalem. And it's not even the territory of Israel. So that was so shocking when President Trump and his first administration moved the embassy to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem wasn't even in Israel. It's in the West Bank. Supposedly Syrian territory. But Syria hasn't been able to defend it. And so it's just sitting ripe. Tons of water and farmland. And so Israel says, it looks kind of Israeli to me. And so the plan is to have this continuous Jewish presence encircling Jerusalem and to merge the surrounding area into the city's urban fabric. So this reinforces the eastern flank of the capital. It provides strategic depth. It secures Highway Number 1, the vital corridor to the Dead Sea and the Jordan Valley. And then it serves East Jerusalem. It cuts East Jerusalem off from its natural Palestinian hinterland. It physically blocks the West Bank's access to the eastern part of the city, cutting East Jerusalem off from Ramallah in the north and Bethlehem in the south. And it dismantles the territorial continuity of any future Palestinian state, which I have quoted some leadership in the past that that's the real idea behind annexing the West Bank, is to prevent the creation of a Palestinian state. Because in Gaza, where you got 2 million Palestinians, the number, of course, is decreasing by the day, there's nothing there to make a state. There's just debris and famine and starvation. Interesting tools of the genocidal policies of the IDF. But in the West Bank, you have water. Here you have the roots to create a Palestinian state. In fact, if you look at any map prior to 1948 of the Middle East, you see one big word covering the entire area: Palestine. So if you can tear up the territorial continuity of any future Palestinian state, instead of a unified space, you get this network of all these little isolated enclaves, and you put in all these bypass roads and tunnels that compensates for a loss of direct access to Jerusalem. You destroy the symbolic nature identification of a Palestinian entity. And what they're trying to do is to shift the debate over Jerusalem's status from the realm of diplomacy to the realm of indisputable facts that all of Jerusalem, especially East Jerusalem and West, is now Greater Israel. And once that eastern part is built up, the vision of East Jerusalem as the capital of a Palestinian state disappears like the early morning frost in the rising summer sun. And so this E1 plan out of Israel embodies two opposing principles. For the Israelis, this idea of a managed continuity of control, and for the Palestinians, an ever-growing vacuum of self-governance. One side gains an uninterrupted corridor of dominance, the other is left with a fragmented territory and goodbye self-determination. And who's going to stop them? Who stops Israel from doing this? Votes in the General Assembly of the UN? So it's no surprise that the international reaction to this new E1 plan has been very swift and unambiguous from the EU and the UN. The finance minister Smotrich, commenting on the launch of this, said out loud what the maps had already suggested. He said, "This project will bury the idea of a Palestinian state." They're not even hiding it anymore. In an August interview broadcast on I-24 News in Israel, Netanyahu said he feels a strong connection to the vision of a greater Israel. Now, I think if you ask the average American, what are the boundaries of the greater Israel? Or does it just mean make Israel great again? Yes, it's territorial in its definition. For Arab capitals, this is a broadly stated confirmation of Israel's true maximal expansion. I mean, the military campaign in Gaza and the constant expansion of Israel autonomy into the West Bank. These aren't two separate plans, Plan A and Plan B. They're parts of one single integrated agenda. The regional response has been swift, of course, and uncompromising, from warnings from Jordan to collective condemnation from a lot of international institutions. And in the midst of all of this coming out of the Knesset, you have the meeting of the Hamas leadership in Doha sitting down to go over the terms of ceasefire, return of the hostages, and the regain of some kind of political control of Gaza, which, of course, the IDF would never accept, Netanyahu would never accept it, but they're over there meeting. And so Israel, realizing the opposition is taking a positive step forward, if nothing else, in world recognition of their own existence, bombs them, kills them in the last 12 hours. So in Gaza, where you have this forced subjugation of the IDF moving in and saying, keys to your apartment, please. In the West Bank, you have a reconfiguration of the political geography because of the highways that they're laying out. And so you get this language of new roads, rezoning, the demography of the whole area being changed, a little bit like gerrymandering over here. And so you get this image from the Knesset. You people forget your intention to govern. As the lines converge in Gaza's ongoing shattering of their neighborhoods, in the planning documents of how they're going to completely change East Jerusalem to complete Israeli control, and in the statements that are coming out of Israeli leadership, the space for any negotiated outcome gets narrower and narrower all the time, and then you bomb whoever has to sign the agreements, like they did in the last 12 hours, and what do you have? Remember the movie The Day After? Apparently that was a movie that really catapulted Ronald Reagan into his strategic defense initiative, because the day after the nuclear attack on America was so powerful in its video presentation that it caught the attention of an awful lot of people. Here, there is no day after. The day after happened a long time ago. What exists instead is this prearranged aftermath designed to leave no room for alternatives. Even as the peacemakers of Hamas leadership were meeting here in the last 12 hours, and efforts inside the Knesset who want peace with Hamas, despite the Likud right-wing, tyranny of the Knesset. In the midst of all this, even before a peace agreement could possibly be signed between these two opposing groups, the map is already being drawn. And in the end, it's the map that becomes this decisive argument, not a treaty. There isn't going to be a treaty with Hamas. There isn't going to be a treaty with the Palestinian leadership or their authority. There's going to be a cleaning out of the Palestinian people as this genocide continues. Now, the current military operation that is referred to as Gideon's chariot has not been officially declared an occupation, but it certainly looks like one. And the IDF armored units have reached Sabra and are engaged in ongoing combat. And a strategic point where fighting has continued now for over a week. And the military descriptions of these actions are operations, way out on the periphery, but it's obviously the opening barrage, the opening phase of a full assault on Gaza City. So in the last 24, 36 hours, the pattern's only intensified. And the artillery and the airstrikes have been systematically clearing eastern and northern districts in preparation for armored and infantry advances. And just as the world news organizations are focused on what's going to happen in the next several days in Gaza City, the IDF bombs Doha, Qatar. Is that confusing? The military action is now reinforced by this large-scale mobilization of personnel on the part of the IDF. A new conscription has been phased in. A new draft order is out right now for all the boys and girls that got away with the first one. And the main wave that's going to be marching in, if they haven't already started, into Gaza City is about 60,000 people. Reservists. With additional groups to line up behind them and follow in through the fall and into the winter if necessary. This is not a tactical raid, because every time they've done a tactical raid, they got their butts kicked and pushed back out. This is an occupation. And it's not going to be measured by the advancement of military markers on a map. It's going to be measured by the intense anti-Palestinian efforts that are being made at the least expense to the IDF reservists that caused the Palestinian population to continue to thin out. And the diplomatic efforts are unfolding all alongside the military campaign. August 18th, Hamas, through Egyptian and Qatari intermediaries, agreed to the outline of a ceasefire that was known as the Witkoff Plan from Stephen Witkoff. It proposed a 60-day pause. It proposed the release of 10 living hostages and the return of the remains of 18 others in exchange for Israeli actions concerning Palestinian detainees and humanitarian access to bring food and water to the starving Palestinians. And the Israeli government has not officially agreed to that plan and insists that all hostages have to be included. Nonetheless, Hamas's offer is already being used by Israel as leverage. And I'm trying to ascertain the meaning of what just happened in Doha in light of this ongoing invasion of Gaza City. And so this is why I think they're just after cleansing, an ethnic cleansing. It's not only to dismantle Hamas's infrastructure, but it's to escalate this choice between a truce on Israeli terms and a full military entry into the city. I mean, if you were a Gaza resident right now, Gaza City, and you knew this was coming, and you knew they would kill your children, because they've already been killing children, why wouldn't they not kill yours? Would you turn over Hamas leadership? to prevent this from happening? In August, Netanyahu publicly affirmed his strong personal identification with the vision of the Promised Land and the Greater Israel. And this statement provoked, obviously, strong reaction from Arab capitals, because Greater Israel will swallow up Arab capitals. So the on-the-ground reality is more complex, much more sobering. I mean, after nearly 2 years of conflict, the IDF has not eliminated the threat. Hamas is still there. And Hamas has stopped every IDF invasion into Gaza. That's why the IDF doesn't have control of Gaza, because Hamas is far stronger than mainstream media is letting you on. And the IDF has suffered significant losses, and there's no clear consensus within the officer corps on launching another ground offensive in Gaza. Because all the buildings that the Israelis have knocked down, the IDF, excuse me, not Israelis, all the buildings the IDF has knocked down are the hiding places for Hamas's anti-tank missile firing positions. Thank you, Samer. Samer says Hamas just announced their political team survived the Zionist attack. Well, there's some scuttle out there that there was some warning ahead of time in order to try to minimize collateral damage with Qatari citizens. Well, if that was the case, and certainly Hamas's intel would pick up incoming missiles so that they could effectively respond. And certainly Hamas's leadership isn't sitting in areas that, 100-mile-an-hour wind would blow over. My point is this. Whenever things like this happen, and I have been watching several attacks on Gaza by the IDF since October 7th, 2 years ago. And every one of them was stalled out within a week or two or three, and then started to be pushed back because Hamas is much stronger than Western media will let you know. It's just the same thing with the Ukrainian forces, far weaker than mainstream media will let you know. And so in this attempt, why did they decide to try to take out the Hamas leadership, sitting down and going over the peace negotiation offer between the IDF and Hamas, the release of hostages, certain compromises, and then try to take them out? We did the same thing with Iranian leaders several months ago. So this, after this security briefing that recently happened, the opposition leader in the Knesset, Lapid, stated that a nuke occupation of Gaza would be a grave mistake, one for which Israel would pay a very high price. Now, there's a sane voice coming out of the Knesset. And why would he make such a declaration? Because he's watched the history. He's seen what Hamas has done to other incursions by the IDF into Gaza. And then they call up 60,000 reservists, many of which are leaving Israel or have already left Israel because they know they will die. It's just like the conscripts picked up off the streets in Kyiv, sent to the front lines in the oblasts occupied by Russia. Countries such as France, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Malta are preparing to take steps towards recognizing Palestinian statehood this week at the no, it's next week, I think, at the General Assembly of the UN. However, the situation transcends even the local dynamics because against the backdrop of this instability worldwide, including regional conflicts and this disrupted global trade routes, and what the Houthis are doing through the Red Sea. I mean, the Gaza campaign increasingly appears to be part of a broader, long-term war of attrition. And within Israeli strategic thinking, the ultimate objective seems to be the closure, the elimination, the burying of the Palestinian question altogether. I mean, under this logic, humanitarian consequences are not considered constraints. But they're starving, it doesn't matter. But they're targeting Palestinian children. Doctors Without Borders are showing X-ray pictures of round holes in the heads of Palestinian children. Doesn't matter. Humanitarian consequences are not considered constraints. We have to go get those Hamas bastards. By the end of this month, more than 640,000 Palestinians are expected to face total food deprivation. Even with this assessment, it hasn't shifted current trajectory. And so I'm going to close what I have to say here back with the attack on Doha by the IDF. Because why would they do that now, at the outset of their attack on Gaza City? This so-called precise strike. Shin Bet, their intelligence arm there, was telling them when and where and how. The IDF did not name the exact site of the target. But this is the latest out of the IDF. Prior to the strike, measures were taken in order to mitigate harm to civilians, including the use of precise munitions and additional intelligence. Precise munitions. Have they been using unprecise munitions? So at least 10 blasts were heard in Doha that rocked, of course, the Hamas headquarters. Footage that's circulating online shows the building was badly damaged, and according to multiple media reports citing Hamas sources, the strike targeted the group's negotiating team, which has been discussing, as I said, the latest U.S. proposal on the cessation of hostilities with Israel. So what does that tell you? What does that tell you about the Israeli opinion of the American proposals for peace in Gaza? It's just madness. I don't think it's funny. I'm not laughing because I think it's funny. The psychic shock of what's going on here. The only thing that keeps me from total hysteria over this is the ability to laugh over what's happening here. This will do it for today. I'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. with a health show that I think you will enjoy. Especially two people I want to talk about. A 13-year-old young lady born at 26 weeks, serious cerebral palsy, and what happened to her after her first correction. And then an older lady in her late 70s, screaming in pain when she came in. I saw her yesterday for, I think, the third time, just dancing and singing. I'll talk about that tomorrow. You be safe out there. Keep your wits about you, and that is probably going to do it for today's show. As I bring the stream to an end as well. Thank you, streamers. I hope you got something out of this. Not confusion, but a clear idea of what is taking place. Just don't Don't be confused by all these little sideshows that are going on. Israel has every intention of grabbing every last piece of land they can for total domination of the Middle East.